When the world finally stops to confront the horrors it once allowed, the question becomes unavoidable. How far can a person go in the name of obedience before responsibility comes crashing back? In a courtroom where every witness carries the weight of a nation's conscience, the truth becomes something no one can outrun. So let's start at the beginning. Hello to all the classic people who are returning. I'm glad you're back. I want to welcome any new visitors and let you know there will be spoilers ahead. Today on Classic Movie Review, we are taking on Judgment at Nuremberg, 1961. This film has an IMDb rating of 8.3. Rotten Tomatoes lists it with a 93% on the tomato meter and a 93% audience score. Cranky old New York Times film critic Bosley Carruthers said in the December 20th, 1961 review, quote, "Within the scope and depth of this picture, which runs for something more than 3 hours, there are many disturbing intimations and revealing performances. There are questions of the moral responsibility of politics and religious power, thoughts on the weakness of people, and some shocking looks at concentration camp film." Unquote. This movie received 10 Oscar nominations and 2 wins. The nominees were for Best Picture, Best Actor in a Leading Role, Spencer Tracy, Best Actor in a Supporting Role, Montgomery Clift, Best Actress in a Supporting Role, Judy Garland, Best Director, Stanley Kramer, Best Cinematographer, Black and White, Ernest Laszlo, Best Art Decoration, Set Decoration, Black and White, Rudolph Stannard, George Milo, Best Costume Design, Black and White, Jean Louise, and Best Film Editing, Frederick Knudsen. The film won for Best Actor in a Leading Role, Maximilian Schell, and Best Writing, Screenplay based on material from another medium, Abby Mann. I've wanted to review this movie for a long time, and it falls into my favorite subgenre, military trials. With the new Russell Crowe, Rami Malek, Nuremberg 2025 being released in the late fall, it is time to stop stalling and deal with one of the greatest cast ever assembled. This film stands as one of the great morality dramas of American cinema. It forces viewers to look directly at the structures that make injustice possible and to consider the cost of silence in the face of cruelty. Judgment at Nuremberg is not a film of easy answers. Instead, it asks questions that remain relevant even today. The performances are extraordinary, and the script navigates legal, ethical, and emotional terrain with precision. It's a film that deserves its place in the canons of essential drama. Actors. Burt Lancaster has appeared on the show many times, including The Train, 1964, Go Tell the Spartans, 1978, 7 Days in May, 1964, and The Birdman of Alcatraz. In Judgment at Nuremberg, he plays Dr. Ernst Janning, a once respected legal scholar who must face the consequences of the rulings he supported. Lancaster plays Janning with a haunting stillness that makes his eventual confession one of the film's most powerful moments. His performance captures the internal collapse of a man who knows that silence becomes complicity. Marlene Dietrich previously appeared on the show in No Highway in the Sky, 1951. Here she steps into the role of Frau Bergholt, a German widow attempting to live with the legacy of a defeated nation. Dietrich gives the character a quiet elegance and a sense of personal conflict that emerges in her conversations with Judge Haywood. She reflects the desire of many Germans to move forward while also revealing the lingering weight of the past. It's a nuanced and understated performance. Richard Widmark has been featured before in Pickup on South Street, 1953, Roadhouse, 1948, Warlock, 1959, St. Joan, 1957, and The Alamo, 1960. He brings sharp intensity to Colonel Tad Lawson, the American prosecutor determined to hold the defendants accountable. Widmark excels at playing driven men who refuse to back down, and he uses that strength here to full effect. His courtroom presence is forceful, and he becomes the loudest voice, reminding the world that justice must not be forgotten or set aside. Montgomery Clift was previously reviewed in Red River, 1948, and From Here to Eternity, 1953. In this movie, he delivers one of his most heartbreaking performances in a single extended scene. He appears as sterilization survivor Rudolph Peterson, whose life was shattered by the very legal system on trial. Clift's physical and emotional fragility adds devastating authenticity to his testimony. His halted speech and wounded expressions turn the legal argument into something painfully human. Ray Teal was cast in the role of the politically expedient Judge Curtis Ives. Teal built a long and reliable career as one of classic Hollywood's most recognizable, tough character actors, often playing authority figures, hard cases, or quietly menacing background players who who add texture and realism to every scene. He appeared in major post-war dramas like The Best Years of Our Lives, 1946, contributing to the film's grounding sense of everyday Americans returning from war, and followed it with strong supporting work in hard-edged noirs such as Brute Force 1947 and The Asphalt Jungle 1950, where his presence reinforced the brutal, unsentimental tone of those worlds. Teal was especially effective in stories about power, corruption, and pressure. In Ace in the Hole 1951, he fits seamlessly into Billy Wilder's cynical portrayal of media manipulation, while in The Command 1954, he was placed in a military role where his no-nonsense demeanor felt entirely authentic. Across the films, Teal rarely sought the spotlight, but his steady performances gave credibility to the environments around the lead. His body of work stands as a testament to the importance of strong supporting players in classic cinema. Spencer Tracy brings monumental moral authority to his role as Chief Justice Dan Haywood, drawing on the same quiet integrity that defined his finest work. As in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner 1967, he embodies reason, decency under social pressure, and like Bad Day at Black Rock 1955, he projects moral courage without ever raising his voice. Tracy plays the judge as a thoughtful, deeply humane man who listens more than he speaks, recalling the principled resolve he showed in Inherit the Wind 1960. His pauses and measured delivery convey a man determined to find the truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable for everyone involved. There's also a statesman's weariness here, reminiscent of The Last Hurrah 1958, and a reflective calm that echoes the quiet endurance of The Old Man and the Sea 1958. Every moment of understated warmth recalls his lighter touch in Death Set 1957. Tracy anchors this film with dignity and restraint, making him the steady moral center around which the entire story turns. Maximilian Schell delivers a commanding, sharply focused performance as defense attorney Hans Rolfe, a role that earned him the Academy Award for Best Actor. He brings the same intellectual intensity and moral seriousness seen in A Bridge Too Far 1977, where conviction collides with impossible odds, and the cool analytical edge he later displayed in The Black Hole 1979. In the courtroom, Schell turns legal arguments into moral battlegrounds, refusing to play Rolfe as a simple villain. Instead, he approaches the character with the emotional complexity and restraints found in Julia 1977, portraying a man who genuinely believes in the case he is making, no matter how unsettling it may be. There's also a sense of looming consequences in his performances, a quiet awareness of catastrophe that echoes the grave inevitability of Deep Impact 1998. The result is a riveting portrayal that stands among the greatest courtroom performances in film history. Judy Garland, star of The Wizard of Oz 1939, gives a quiet, emotionally wrenching performance as Irene Hoffman that stands in stark contrast to the warmth and musical joy she brought to Meet Me in St. Louis 1944. Here, Garland strips everything away, using her natural vulnerabilities to portray a woman deeply scarred by the events she endured. Her testimonial scene is among the most powerful moments in the film. She trembles as she speaks. Her voice barely holds together, revealing the lasting damage left by the years of coercion and fear. There's an emotional nakedness that echoes the raw, painful honesty of her comeback performance in A Star is Born 1954. It is a rare late-career dramatic showcase that proves Garland's extraordinary range and reminds us of just how devastatingly effective she could be without a single song. Werner Klimpler, best known for playing Colonel Klink on television's World War II POW spoof Hogan's Heroes, appears as Emo Hahn, a defendant who still believes in the ideology he once served. Klimpler played Hahn with an unsettling calm, creating a character who is dangerous precisely because he sees no error in his thinking. His lack of remorse and unwavering self-righteousness make him one of the most disturbing figures in the story. His performance highlights the film's central question of personal responsibility. William Shatner, the great captain of the United States Federation of Planets, USS Enterprise, who was briefly covered in Star Trek TOS movie review Does BG Hold Up?, plays Captain Byers, the young American officer assisting the tribunal. We all know that Shatner's best film role was in Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan 1983, followed by Star Trek IV The Voyage Home 1986, and finally Free Enterprise 1998, and if you haven't seen that, go check it out. Shatner's crisp energy and earnest manner help frame the proceedings through the eyes of a witness to history as it unfolds. His scenes provide structure for the courtroom environment and a sense of the generational divide between those who fought the war and those who came after. Story. Under the credits, Nazi imagery is shown, including the explosion of the symbol of the Zeppelin Tribune, Adolf Hitler's most powerful pulpit, at the heart of the Nazi Party's rally ground in Nuremberg, clearly showing the appropriate method for dealing with Nazis.
We're going to be doing one thing and one thing only: killing Nazis.
The year is 1948, and the city of Nuremberg is a bombed-out wreck. Chief Judge Dan Haywood, Spencer Tracy, an American jurist from Maine, is being driven through the city along with American Senator Burkett, Edward Bynes. Haywood is shocked by the level of devastation. Their German driver Schmidt, Paul Bush, is very efficient and eager to please the Americans. The German Museum of Nuremberg says there are 3 reasons why the trials were held in this city. Firstly, there was a standing building large enough for the international trial. Second, a prison nearby to house the prisoners. And finally, because this city was used extensively by the Nazis for their rallies and propaganda. The war had been over for 3 years, but Germany had not been rebuilt. When I was stationed there in the late 1970s, you could view the eastern side, which was under Soviet control, and many buildings were still not repaired. Haywood is taken to his quarters, where he is introduced to his aide, Captain Beyer, William Shatner, and the house staff, Frau Halbstadt, Virginia Christine, and Herr Halbstadt, Ben Wright. The level of luxury inside strikes Haywood compared to the outside. The house formerly belonged to a Nazi general and his wife. Haywood is also not comfortable with the formality and the fawning he is being shown. Haywood says he doesn't need the staff, but the senator tells him that by working here, they get to eat. These trials are taking place after the leaders have already been dealt with, and many people in America are beginning to lose their taste for justice. Haywood says it is very important for this trial, the trial of judges, to continue, for when judges fail to do their job, evil can thrive. Much of this movie takes place in the courtroom, and it is a military trial. Members of all allied nations are present, and elaborate translation and recording equipment has been installed. 4 criminals are brought into the court. Haywood is joined on the bench by Judge Curtis Ivey, Ray Teal, and Judge Kenneth Norris, Kenneth McKenna. The defendants are Emil Hahn, Werner Klempler. He is unrepentant and readily recites nationalist slogans, defending the past with smug confidence. Next is Friedrich Hofstetter, Martin Brandt, and he is timider and more compliant. Next is Werner Lampe, Torben Myers, who shows contempt for the proceedings. Finally, Dr. Ernst Janning, Bert Lancaster, who was once a world-renowned legal scholar. Janning refuses to stand or listen, but a soldier helps him to his feet and gives him a headset. After he remains silent, German lawyer Hans Rolf, Maximilian Schell, answers on behalf of the defendant. Rolf is intelligent, passionate, and competent. The defendants are charged with crimes against humanity for enforcing Nazi racial laws, overseeing forced sterilization, and using their judicial authority to destroy innocent lives. On Janning's behalf, Rolf enters into the record that the defendant does not recognize the tribunal's authority. This is a legal tactic used in every military trial shortly before they execute the defendant. The prosecution is led by Colonel Ted Lawson, Richard Widmark. Lawson is driven, bitter, and determined that the criminals must face justice. Lawson says they destroyed law and justice in their support of the Nazis, and they are murderers and torturers and are just as guilty as the leaders. He states that they weren't warped from childhood like being a Hister youth. This is followed by they embraced the ideology of the Third Reich as educated adults when they most of all should have valued justice. Herr Rolf opens up for the defense by arguing that they are seeking a code of law that the entire world must be required to follow. He speaks of the character of the men and speaks of what the defendants did before they became Nazi stooges and that they were just following the laws of the country. If he cannot prove the defendant's innocence, he aims to show that the entire world shares the defendant's guilt and that no country, including the United States, is free from hypocrisy. At the recess, Lawson looks at Rolf with hate and contempt. The judges wonder if their task can be accomplished. Haywood asks Captain Byers if he is dating a German girl, and he confirms that he is. Haywood goes for a walk in the rubble, where he sees the citizens clearing debris. He travels to the old city where food can be obtained, and pretty prostitutes work their craft. He travels to the site of the Nazi rallies. The speeches and the cheers of the ghosts can be heard. Rolf visits with Yawning and confirms that he is being treated well by the Americans. Yawning did not want Rolfe as his counsel. Rolfe admits that he admired Yawning, but the criminal remains cold. Lawson begins building his case with chilling clarity. First witness, Dr. Carl Weck, John Winscraft, states that when the Nazis took over, judges were no longer independent and followed the political will of the party. Most adapted rather than resigned. The witness says they must have known what this would lead to. The use of the death penalty and sterilization increased as well. Beginning in 1935, all judges were required to wear a swastika on their robes. Rolfe has the witness testify to the horrible conditions at the end of the Weimar Republic. He also asks if following the Nazis would be beneficial to the country. Rolfe tries to justify sterilization to help stop criminality. He then reads an American legal text justifying sterilization written by Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes. Weck says that the sterilization was used against political opponents. Rolfe impugns Weck because he signed the 1934 civil servant's oath affirming loyalty to Hister to save his own pension. The two attorneys end the day by having a shouting match. Back at his quarters, Haywood reads books by Yawning and about the founding of the Weimar Republic. Haywood goes to the kitchen and the former owner of the house, Frau Berthold, Marlene Dietrich, is there gathering some of her possessions from the basement. Haywood is kind and helps her carry the boxes. He lets Schmidt drive Frau Berthold home. Haywood questions Frau Halberstadt about her work for the Bertholds and how long the family had lived in the home. He asks what it was like to live under the Nazis. Nazis who? We never heard of them. He then asks about the Dachau concentration camp and what they knew. They knew nothing. Nothing! I visited this place, and I'm still struck by an image of a pile of eyeglasses as large as a building. Frau Halberstadt says that Hister did do some good things, such as building the Autobahn. When you start a sentence with, Hister did some good things, just stop right there. It's not going to work out. Haywood asks about Frau Berchthold's military husband, and Frau Halberstadt tells her that he was executed after the Malmedy trial. The Malmedy massacre took place during the Battle of the Bulge near the end of World War II. 84 captured American prisoners were executed, although they should have been given protection under the Geneva Convention. It's referenced in the Battle of the Bulge film. It's not totally accurate, but you get the point. A trial was held in Nuremberg in 1946. The highest-ranking German tried was Waffen-SS General Sepp Dietrich. It is ironic that the Nazi criminal shared the last name with the actress who played his wife in the film, as Marlene Dietrich was staunchly anti-Nazi. Because of this stance, Dietrich was persona non grata in Germany for many years. She raised funds to help Jews and dissidents escape from Germany. In 1939, she renounced her German citizenship and became an American. Dietrich was one of the first celebrities to sell war bonds. She toured the US, Algeria, Italy, the UK, France, and the Netherlands, giving USO shows to Allied soldiers, sometimes near the front line. She allowed her recordings to be used by the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, for propaganda broadcasts. After the war, Dietrich reconnected with her sister and brother-in-law. Oddly, they lived in the town of Belsen, where they ran a small cinema. Since it was near the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, Nazi camp officers often visited the cinema. Dietrich received the U.S. Medal of Freedom in 1947 and the Legion of Honor from France for her wartime effort. She was vilified in Germany long after the war. Finally, in 2002, she was made an honorary citizen of Berlin, her birth city. Back to the movie. Back in court, Lawson presents a stack of affidavits from people being forced to submit to sterilization. Rolfe objects based on a ruling by an earlier Allied tribunal that documents must be supported by live testimony. The objection is sustained. Rolfe has fallen into a trap, as Lawson calls Rudolph Peterson Montgomery Clift. Peterson is a simple but broken man. His father was a member of the Communist Party. In 1933, members of the SA, a Nazi paramilitary group known as the Storm Division or Brown Shirts, broke into their house and attacked the family. However, in this case, Peterson and his family won the fight. Later, when he tried to get a truck driver's license, the official was one of the attacking SA men. Hofstetter was the judge at the hearing called by the SA man. As a result of the hearing, Peterson was ordered to be sterilized. Yawning was the Minister of Justice and was named in the order. Rolfe's cross was based on the fact that Peterson and his brothers were laborers. Rolf has to take the Nazi line that some people are inferior and should not be allowed to reproduce. Rolf breaks Peterson, saying his mother was mentally incompetent.
I want that you tell me, was she feeble-minded? My mother.
I feel it is my duty to point out to the tribunal that the witness is not in control of his mental processes.
I know I am not. Since that day, I've been half I've ever been.
Haywood is disgusted by the examination. At a dinner that night, Judge Ives calls Lawson and the prosecution radicals. I don't know if that's code for being Jewish or for being communist. He then asks Haywood about his politics. Haywood says he is a rock-ribbed Republican who liked FDR. A reporter and Frau Burkholdt arrive at the diner. The reporter says the American public is no longer interested in the Nuremberg trials. Frau Burkholdt and Haywood get along famously. She invites Haywood to a concert the following week. When Lawson and his colleague, Major Abe Rabnitz, Joseph Bernard, approaches the table, Frau Burkholdt abruptly leaves because Lawson was a prosecutor at her husband's trial. Major Abe Radnitz comes across as being Jewish, giving people like Judge Ivey the opportunity to say that radicals or Zionists are driving the prosecution. This is my opinion and it is not spelled out in the film. Judge Ivey pipes in that the Nazi leaders wouldn't have been given a death sentence at the current time. Lawson is a little drunk, trying to drink away the events of the day's trial. He makes a good case for Americans being kind, but he still wants to indict the entire country.
Nazi ain't got no humanity. They're the foot soldiers of a Jew-hating, mass-murdering maniac, and they need to be destroyed.
As they all say, they knew nothing about what happened. We knew nothing. An announcement is made calling certain officers back to their commands. Captain Byers comes to the table with his pretty German date and says that the Soviets are toppling the Czechoslovakian government and American units are being sent to the border. Of course, this is another reason a lot of Americans wanted to cozy up with the former Nazis against the Soviet Union, and they played that up a little bit in the Patton 1970. In prison, Emil Hahn excitedly reads a newspaper about how the Americans must stand up to the Red Threat. Hahn says this is exactly what Hitler said would happen and that they would all be saved by it. Janning feels superior to the other defendants, thinking he was not a Nazi. Haywood attends an excellent concert. He finally sees Frau Burkholdt sitting in a box, looking very regal. After the concert, Haywood walks Frau Burkholdt home. She is living in a bombed-out wreck with boarded windows. She asks him how he feels about Janning, but he will not discuss the man. She tells of a time Janning took down Hister in a verbal battle. She continues that Janning, her and her husband, all hated Hister. They never heard of the guy. See, nobody backed him at all. She goes on to say that her husband was innocent and the victim of political murder. Haywood tells her that he just wants to understand. Major Radnitz tells Lawson that he has located Irene Hoffman, but she doesn't want to testify. Lawson takes a train to Berlin. He's shown in green screen. I know it wasn't green screen yet. Against films of bombed out Berlin, including the Brandenburg Gate and the Reichstag, are the seat of the government that the commies fought room to room to capture in a race to place the red flag above it. Irene's husband does not want her to testify. Lawson makes a good case, and Irene Hoffman, Judy Garland, decides to go as Janning is on trial. She knows if she testifies, the pro-Nazi crowd will attack their store. Lawson and his team introduce the Feldstein case. Rolf strongly objects, but is overruled. The case is about a well-respected Jewish man who was accused of having sex with 16-year-old Irene Hoffman. The charges came about due to Nazi racial purity laws. Defendant Hahn was the prosecutor. Defendant Janning was one of the judges. Lawson calls Irene Hoffman to the stand. Judy Garland nailed it as a reluctant and fragile witness.
There was nothing like you're trying to make it sound.
Did you sit on his lap?
Stop it! Stop it!
What else do you admit to, Mrs. Fowler? What else? Hello?
Feldstein was a family friend and occasionally visited Irene after her parents died. She says Hahn coerced her. Feldstein was convicted and sentenced to death. Irene received a 2-year sentence for perjury after that first trial. Rolf says that they will recall Irene during the defense. Lawson continues that the defendant's actions allowed for multitudes to be sent to the concentration camps without due process. Without due process, it's just a crime. Radnitz then has Lawson called as a witness. Lawson testifies that he commanded troops that liberated some concentration camps. In one of the most shocking parts of the movie, historical footage of the horrors of the camps are shown. Haywood and others in the court are shocked by what they are seeing. It is sickening to watch to this day. Hahn is indignant that they were shown the films, believing that, as judges, they were above the crimes. When they asked another Nazi who is in the prison to explain how it could so easily happen, he gives them a technical explanation of the how and not the why. That night, Haywood meets Frau Burkholdt in a diner. He doesn't eat because of what he has seen earlier in the day. Frau Burkholdt talks about the films that Lawson showed. She says they didn't know. They didn't know. Haywood says as far as he can make out, no one in the country knew. She's still angry that her husband was hanged like a criminal and not shot by a firing squad as a military man should have been.
My husband was a military man, all his life. He was entitled to a soldier's death. He asked for that. That he should be permitted the dignity of a firing squad. You know what happened. He was hanged with the others.
The other diners sing a happy song as the camera pulls in and out. This gives the feeling of being on a wild ride and not knowing which way is up. Haywood senses Frau Burkholdt has just been lobbying him the entire time. Back in court, Rolf begins the defense by apologizing for what was done in the camps. He then attacks, saying the film should not be used against these defendants. He argues that Janning and the others stayed in power only to preserve justice. Rolf then returns to the Feldstein case and calls Elsa Lindenau Olga Fabian, who earlier worked for Feldstein. Lindenau testifies that she saw Irene kissing Feldstein at her doorway and that she once saw Irene on Feldstein's lap. On cross, Lawson asked Lindenau about her political affiliation and being a member of the Nazi Party. A shaken Rolf recalls Irene to the stand. He attacks with precision and aggression. Rolf maintains it was a matter of just following the law. Irene says Feldstein was like a father to her. Lawson objects, but Haywood overrules. This seems like a trap for Rolf, as his super aggression undermines his case. After having remained silent the entire trial, Janning jumps up and says, "Herr Rolf, are we going to do this again?"
Where were we? Where were we when Hitler began shrieking his hate in Reichstag? Where were we when our neighbors were being dragged out in the middle of the night to Dachau? Where were we when they cried out in the night to us? Were we deaf? Dumb? Blind?
Haywood regains order in the trial, and he's trying to decide if Janning can make a statement. Both lawyers make their case. Haywood allows an adjournment until the next day. In private, Rolf says he has done things in the court that make him ashamed, but he says they must look to the future and to what is best for Germany. He also invokes the American nuclear bombing of Japan. The standoff with the Soviets is intensifying. The military brass is moving for speedy trials. Senator Burkett, backed by Judge Ives, calls for leniency in the trials. At the next session, Janning testifies about the Feldstein case. He says he went along for the country's benefit, thinking it was just a phase. But then, they were swept up in the power. Janning was content to remain silent, but when he realized that the specter would have to be invoked again, as Rolf was doing in the courtroom, he decided to speak. He says the verdict in the Feldstein trial was predetermined, and Feldstein was a sacrifice. He says they knew. Rolf objects, but Janning continues. Hans calls Janning a traitor. Janning condemns the others and himself. Rolf is broken, but tries to defend the men who went along. He tries to indict the entire world for not stopping Hitler. He clearly indicts the Soviet Union for signing a treaty with the Nazis and the Vatican for going along. Rolf seems like a crazy man and says Americans made war profits off the war also.
It is easy to condemn the German people, to speak of the basic flaw in the German character that allowed Hitler to rise to power, but at the same time, comfortably ignore the basic flaw of character that made the Russians sign pacts with him, Winston Churchill praise him, American despots profit by him.
The American army is becoming increasingly concerned about the Soviet blockade of Berlin and begins airlifting supplies to the city, which began in May 1948. A general asks Lawson to ease up on the trial. Lawson says he won't bend.
I'm gonna go the limit. And not you, not the Pentagon, not God on his throne is gonna make you do
think you're talking to? Who the hell do you think you're talking to?
He won't go along just because it's easy. The general actually sounds like a German apologizing for going along. At the trial, Lawson closes by arguing that the crimes must be seen for what they were, not for what needs to be done today. Haywood allows the defendants to make their final statements. Hahn says he stands by what he did and will not apologize. Hofstetter basically says he did what the law required and he looked no further. Lampe breaks down and cries. Yanni says he has nothing to add. Judge Ivey struggles with the tension between domestic and international law. Haywood looks at the images of the victims. He won't bend to the rationalization of letting the Nazis go. Haywood says that the real issue is that the men who did this were not evil degenerates, at least not at the beginning. Finally, Haywood delivers the verdict and the sentences. All four are found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Frau Burkholdt is present in the court.
Before the people of the world, let it now be noted that here in our decision, this is what we stand for. Justice, truth, and the value of a single human being.
The general says Haywood doesn't understand what he means when he says that every life is sacred. Lawson says he does. Judge Ivey's dissents on the verdict and presents the expedient argument. Haywood prepares to leave and says goodbye to his staff. Captain Beyer states that Americans are unpopular in Nuremberg following the verdict. Haywood calls Frau Burkholdt, but she sits under the portrait of her Nazi husband and refuses to answer. Rolf comes into the prison at Yanni's request. Rolf says the other trials of Nazis are ending with not guilty verdicts or light sentences because of the shifting political situation with the Soviets. Haywood says that making decisions based on political expediencies is never the right thing to do. Taking the easy way out is often a slippery slope. Haywood visits Yanni in his cell. Yanni gives Haywood a written record of his cases. Yanni understands the pressure exerted on Haywood to secure a favorable verdict. Yanni says he never knew that it would come to millions of deaths. Haywood tells him that it came to that the first time he sentenced an innocent man. Haywood walks to the prison as German patriotic music plays. The crawl reads that 99 men were sentenced at the Nuremberg trials, which ended in 1949. By 1969, none of the convicted remained in jail, having died or been released. Conclusion: this movie is an amazing courtroom drama. It deals directly with the question of going along because it's easier or doing what you know to be right, even though there will be a cost. The cast delivered remarkable performances and the themes remain relevant in any era where justice struggles against political pressure. Maximilian Schell won the Academy Award for Best Actor for the role of Rolf. Judy Garland's and Montgomery Clift's performances are noteworthy, ranking among the strongest dramatic moments of their careers and demonstrating the depth of their acting. It can't happen here, or can it? World-famous short summary: just following orders is not an excuse. If you enjoyed the show and you want more, please give me a like, subscribe, or comment. It really helps the show get found. You can support the show by using any of the affiliate links in the descriptions. Beware the Moors. Alright, in a second, a couple of boxes will pop up here. One is a similar review to today's film, and the other is a playlist on this topic.